Hey guys, this is Mark with NCEngravers, and today in this video we are going to be discussing the TP9 Optic Cut service. I want to talk to you guys about what's offered, what's not offered, why it's offered, kind of just give you an overall better picture of how the service is performed and what to expect if you want to have this service done through us. Now, first and foremost, the slide that's in my hand came from a customer who brought this to our attention. And this individual is out of Tennessee, and he was like, why don't you guys do a TP9 video of putting an optic on there, explaining it a little bit better. So this was the guy that kind of brought it to our attention. That's one of the reasons why we have his slide in this video. Now this one is done in tungsten. I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about what's going on here, but the reason this is on the table as well is because we had a customer out of Texas send us some stuff. We ended up getting a pecan log, or as some of you guys say, a pecan log. So this is pretty interesting, right? And then we also received some beaver nuggets. So I'm not 100% sure what this is going to taste like, but I do know my kids have been trying to tear it open. So I thought I better do the video before the contents turn up missing and we don't have anything to do a video. So thank you to both of those customers. One, bringing it to our attention about that we should do a video, and second, this individual for sending us in some stuff, which I thought was also pretty cool. And guys, let's jump into the content. So I'm going to set these aside. All right, so on this layout, we have a couple of different optics here. We've got some extra parts here, and of course we have a slide. Now, one of the reasons why this slide is also in the video and this slide is in the video is because sometimes when you order these slides or you buy a gun, they come with a different finish on them. So some of them have a tungsten, some of them have a factory nitride, black nitride finish, and I think there might even be a tan one that's out there, and I know there's some white ones that are out there. So there's some wild ones that are out there. Of course, you can get them in different colors if they've been colored from somebody other than the manufacturer, but typically we would see black and we see a lot of the tungsten. So this is a color match that we obviously offer if you want to go back to this, and we could also go back to black nitride if that was something you wanted to have done. One of the things I want to jump into here with you guys is I want to talk about the optics that fit the slide. Okay, so we've got a 407C, which this is the same as the 507C, the RMR. There's a lot of different optics that fit this same cutout. Okay, so we're just using this particular model as a example today. And then we also have the HS407K. Now there's a lot of different optics that fit that cutout as well. The 507K, the Swamp Fox Sentinel, there's a Springfield makes one called the Wasp, there's the Romeo Zero, the RMSC. So there's a lot of different optics that fit this cutout, okay? So before we jump into all of this work, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these guys apart, and I'm going to probably take this one apart because we're going to be processing this one first. And we can get down to a raw slide with no parts in it, and then we're going to bring it back, and we'll discuss that a little bit better because then we can put an optic on here, and we can kind of not have to sit it on top of where the iron sight is. We can kind of show in relation to how it actually fits in the slide and what that means as far as the other components that are in the slide. So let's get this taken apart, and then let's jump back over to this. All right, guys, we're going to take a moment here and take this apart. This really wasn't something that I had figured we were going to do in the video, but since we're already taking it apart, I thought maybe that'd be kind of educational for some of you guys. I wanted to answer that question about the disassembly. You do not have to take these apart when you send them in. All you need to do is pull the barrel and pull your spring, and then just basically send the slide. We do all the disassembly and the reassembly for you. We would recommend that you provide the optics so we can install that for you and get that aligned with the front sight, which we'll discuss a little bit more in this video. But let's go ahead and take this guy apart. So everybody does this a little bit different. I'm going to show you guys how I do it. First and foremost, we have a couple of different things on the bottom side of this slide. One of those being there's a movable plunger, and then there's also a little, what there is there's a little spring underneath that cap in there, and we're going to take that off first. So what we're going to do is flip this guy over, and we're going to press in on this right here, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to allow this to crack off the side here just a little bit. See, this has got a little bit of a tab here. So now what we can do is just kind of put our hand over the top of this and then use our thumb. We can pop that off. And what that does is that keeps all of these guys from just flying all over the place. Okay, so what you're going to find is you have your plunger that's movable. You can actually see this from the bottom of your slide. This one's kind of hidden. You're only seeing the cap from the bottom side, but there we have the spring. We have the extractor spring, and then we actually have the extractor itself. Now, the way we do this around here is we just bag all that stuff. So before any of these parts turn up missing, we'll put these all in a bag. Oops. And I got it. So that's basically all it is. We're just going to bag those guys. And now we're down to removing the firing pin and the rear cap. The rear cap has a little push pin right here. It's not really a push pin, it's part of the firing pin. And what that does is when you push this in, it allows the rear cap to kind of just slide down. Put your hand over it, pull this guy off, and then that's it. So there's your cap, it comes off. This guy's gonna just slide right out, and this comes out as a single piece. Okay, so that's it for that. Now let's bag these, because we don't want to lose any of those. You guys can kind of see how dirty this is. So usually that's what we would experience. This one has a lot of oil on it, so that's kind of good, but usually we would experience some kind of dirt and filth that's in there. So recommended to wear gloves or do it on something that's not important to you, because you're probably going to stain it. All right, so now we have the LCI, or the loaded chamber indicator. Okay, you can see this guy moves. And what we're going to do is basically, I usually actually don't use the wheeler block. Usually what I do is I'll take a longer punch, and I've got a couple of different ones. This is a roll pin punch that's kind of gotten to the end of life because I've used it too much. I'll start on this side, usually with a regular punch like this, and I can do this at an angle. And then basically what you can do is just take any hammer and start it. The problem with it is these serrat punches won't basically go all the way through on a lot of these. So I'll switch it over to a punch that has a little bit longer piece to it. You can kind of see this one's tapered and this one's not. So we've got a longer shaft on this one. So then I'll switch this over. I'll put my finger on top of here, drive it out, and then that's it. So there's your roll pin. Here's your guy. We're going to pull this out. You can kind of see it pop up. We'll flip it over, and there it is. So you just basically have those three pieces right there. Guys, I know a lot of you have already taken these apart. I know they're not really that complicated, but I thought it kind of would be some good content for the video if you do decide that you want to do it yourself. Once again, we'll bag these parts. So that's it. Everything's in the bag. So now what we have is the rear and the front sight. I'm going to show you guys how I take those out. There's tons of different ways you can do this. You could use something like, you know, a wheeler sight pusher. I'm going to show you a little bit different way that I do it, and hopefully that will encourage you guys maybe at home that don't want to buy a $200 sight pusher how to do it. So I'm going to reposition you guys over to the vise that we're going to see over here, and let's get to work. All right, guys, so our next step is to remove the sights off of the slide. One of the things that we want to do is loosen up this set screw they have back here. You're going to want to take that out. You don't have to take it all the way out, but you got to take it out pretty far enough to where it's not tightening down the rear sight. So get that started first before you attempt this, or you're going to have major problems. Let's go ahead and get this in the vise. I'm going to show you how I do that. So once again, there's multiple ways of doing that. I've got some leather that I use, which is basically just a buffer between the vise jaws. We'll take the rear one out first. These can be pretty difficult. Once again, guys, I'm working with the kind of on the opposite side of the camera, so I don't know how well you'll be able to see all this, but I will try to get out of your way here and you'll be able to see it a little bit better. All right, so that's kind of how I position mine in here, where the actual jaws aren't touching any of the slide. It's just the leather, and you can just get some heavy-duty leather off of eBay, or you could probably even use an old belt. You're going to want to fix that in there pretty good. Now, a couple different things you can use. You could use something like a nylon punch. These are probably not going to drive this sight, okay? It might work on some stuff that's out on the market, but it's probably not going to move these Warren sights. So what I do is I have a bunch of different brass punches that I use. These are just basically bar stock that I cut down. Now you can tell that these are really pretty well worn. So we're going to see what we can get away with here. I mean, they're basically destroyed. So I'll just keep cutting it back on the CNC machine in order to get them cleaned up. But we're going to see what we come up with. We're not going to use brass directly on the... I'm going to have to pull my glove off for this one. I can't get this tape off. We're not going to use brass directly on the sight. What we're going to do is we're just going to take some green tape. break yourself off just a little bit here and basically tear it in half is what I do. I just tear it into a couple pieces like this. Let's see if I can get a better angle here. So you've basically gone over yourself about 4 times. Okay, so at that point what we can do is you can kind of just put it on one side or the other. I'm right-handed, so I swing with my right, so I'm going to drive to my left here. In this particular case, that means the sight would be coming out the left side of the slide. So once you give it a couple of good hits, you'll see it to start driving free right here. You keep going. One of the advantages to the tape is if you get down towards the end, it usually will hold it in without it going flying, and you can kind of pull it off. So sometimes if it breaks through the tape, you'll end up having some marks like this. This is something that you can usually wipe off. If you get it when the brass is kind of fresh on there, it will come off, or you can end up using just like a nylon brush. I mean, you can see how much it's been kind of reduced already, and that's just by me just rubbing it. So you could use a nylon brush and take that off. Last case scenario, if it doesn't come off, you can always use something like a super glue. Just make sure you put oil on it afterwards, or this piece will rust. So unless it's some sort of a stainless sight, most of them are steel. All right, so we're gonna flip this guy around. We're gonna take the front off. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about the front sight a little bit more than the back. The back sights you really can't destroy just because they're just such a solid piece. The front sights you can, okay? So don't ever, under any circumstance, ever put a punch up on this top side of where it is, okay? So basically you have a low side. Let's see if I can explain this better. You've got a low side of the iron sight, okay, which is the part that's inside of the dovetail. And then you've got the high side, which is the part that's basically sticking out of the dovetail or above the slide. Do not ever pound on that top side, because if you do, more than likely you'll crack it, okay? So we're not going to do that. So what's going to happen is, this is one of the reasons why I cut these. They're a 3/8 bar, and I cut them down so they'll fit inside the dovetail. Basically going to do the same thing. We're going to put this here. The only difference is we're going to try to get this piece on the part that's inside of the dovetail, so we're not actually touching the top side at all. We don't want to graze this at all for under any circumstances. So, okay, so that's pretty much it. You can kind of see this guy starting to move here. Same thing, we'll drive it, and usually the tape will kind of capture it so it doesn't fall. We could pull this guy off, and that's pretty much it. Clean this up just a little bit here. And we are all set. So that's it. All right, guys, now that we have the slide taken apart, those parts have been bagged, and we just have basically a blank slide, really doing it with care, and especially those sights, is the way to do it. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to show you guys that. I've been taking slides apart for years, and as you can tell, we're not damaging slides, we're not damaging parts. I don't think we even damaged the coating that was on here from the factory by removing it. So that was pretty good. So if you have that, if you're just kind of like, hey, I want to swap my sights out, I don't really want to have any work done, that is a process that you could take in order to putting new sights in without damaging your existing coating, okay? So that's set up with basically a vise, leather, some green tape, a brass punch, and a hammer is going to really work on about 95% of the projects that come through the door. I've been taking thousands of slides apart for years, and I really haven't damaged any slide that came in here that didn't have pre-existing damage on it. Okay, so there are some oddballs that come in here. Obviously, you get a stuck front sight or a stuck rear sight. But for the majority of the projects that come in, that process will work if you just slow down just a little bit. Okay, so I'm glad I had the opportunity to show you guys that. I think that was the first disassembly video we've done since I've ever done YouTube. I don't think we've really done any other ones that kind of show you how that was done. Now that we have one stripped, we still have one that's together with an iron sight in the back. I think it's going to give us just a better understanding of why we set up the Optic Cuts in the way that we do. Okay, so first and foremost, let's jump into the big question, and that is the full size. Everybody's always like, I want to get an RMR, I want to do this, I want to do that. What's going on with that? I see you guys don't offer it. We don't offer the cutout on the slides for the full-size optics because the screws are on the edge. Okay, so what I mean by that is when you take one of these guys and you put it on here, and we will get into the conversation of rear sight versus no rear sight here in a moment. But when you put this guy on here, and it's going to be hard to see because we're not mounting it. What you're going to find out is by the time we cut this slide down, you know, build a socket basically for it to go in, these screws are actually on the sidewall, and you can kind of briefly see that, I guess, or roughly see that. So what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a flat zone, and then you're going to be drilling down on this angle for your screws. So you're not only going to be having a rough time punching a hole to get it threaded, okay, you're also going to have an issue where when it is on the slide, part of the screw is actually going to be seen from the side, okay? This is not how it's done on a factory slide. The factory optic cut slide, I will show you one of those. I have one here as well. So that's one of the reasons why we don't offer it. The other thing that we have the big question about is with both of these optics is why do we remove the rear sight? So the main answer to that is, and we're just going to use this one as an example, is that if the rear sight is on the slide and you put this guy in front of it, you're going to be cutting into the loaded chamber indicator bar. We're actually going to use the other slide for that. It's going to explain it a little bit better. So we've got a sight on our gun. We're going to drop this guy on here. Even if we back this thing all the way up right to where it's right up against that rear sight, we're still way deep into the loaded chamber indicator channel. Okay, so by the time you remove this part here, you're going to find out that it's a fairly deep channel down in through here. And what's going to happen is this guy would sit here, and you're always taking a chance of blowback coming up that channel and onto the front of the glass of the optic. Okay, you cannot really plug it with anything anymore because if you see right here, we've kind of cut through the roll pin that would retain anything in that socket. Okay, so this is about as far back as we can go, and there's the roll pin. So, you know, if you're thinking, hey, why don't I just put a blank in there and I'll just run it through the side of it, you know, just cut off the back side of that loaded chamber indicator, we'll leave the front side on, it really isn't going to work because there's nothing holding that in there. Okay, not without moving that roll pin forward or something along that line. So that's not something that we're going to offer. It doesn't make any sense. So let's talk about the micro. So I know a lot of you guys are like, well, then why don't you just use the micro? The issue that we run into this with the micro is if you look, I'm going to try to use the other slide for it. If you look in here, okay, you're going to find out that we still have all these pieces on the underside that we just removed. And this guy's going to go here, something like that. We're going to flip him, and you're going to find out that we're up into where some of these pieces are, and we might be able to show it a little better this way. You can kind of see, I'm trying to overlap these a little bit better here. You can kind of see where the optic is and how we're over the hole. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, man, you're like super far forward. But really not, because there's the slope channel right here for your rear sight. Okay, so you have to stay on the front side of that. So we would be basically right in where that spring is. Okay, I would highly not recommend that, or that spring is going to be pushing on top of this the whole time. And once again, we're running into the issue of channel and stuff getting on the front of the optic because it's not plugged anymore. Okay, so the option that we offer for you in the setup is to cut this to the rear of the slide, as seen here. And what would happen is it would not hit your loaded chamber indicator channel. So you keep all this stuff intact. This goes on the slide. This has a rear built-in iron sight, as you guys can see here. Those of you probably are already well aware of that. This guy does not. Okay, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there are no full-size optics that actually have a built-in rear sight into them that I know of. Okay, so the RMR doesn't, the Hollow Suns don't. I don't believe like the Kingslayer does from Swamp Fox. There's a lot of different optics out there that fit that socket, but none of them have a built-in rear iron sight, only the micros. Okay, so this is going to go like this, and it's going to get cut low enough to where it would work with the front iron sight as well. Okay, so you're not out buying new sights. You're able to use the front factory sight that comes with the gun, or you could use different ones. It is a little tall if you go with like the tactical version that have like the suppressor sight. because, you know, since we only offer it with the configuration of removing the rear, if this is a suppressor sight and this is a suppressor sight, the front one probably needs to be replaced to a regular height sight, realistically, in order to look the best and function correctly. But that's how that works. So that goes over there. Now let's talk about one of the other things. I know you guys are kind of like, no, I don't want to lose. I really do not want to lose my rear iron sight. I don't, you know, I know there's one built into the Optic, but I really don't want to lose that. Just, it's something I'm not going to do. Well, if that's the case, something to take into consideration is the factory sights, the factory slides, I should say, the Elite Combat, you're going to be losing that when you put an Optic on it anyhow. Okay, so I know a lot of you guys don't want to lose the rear sight. You don't, for some reason, you don't trust the one that's built into the Optic itself. But if you were to go the more expensive version of this gun, you already lose your rear sight. So there's a plate that goes on here, the Optic goes on here, and there's no rear sight on this gun. Now, if you go with a couple of the other versions, I know the SC model they've got has a rear sight still on it, and it ends up having a smaller socket. So some do and some don't. But the point of this comment that I'm making here is it's not uncommon to lose your rear sight when you add an Optic to a slide. We see this a lot in the SIG world, okay? The P365X, the XL, some of the P320s that are out there are the same way. They have a cap that comes off, the rear sight is removed, and it goes on. So it's not 100% uncommon. And in some cases, if you were looking for the same sized slide and you were going with that, there's a good chance if you went with the Combat version, you're already going to lose it. Okay, so take that into consideration when you're talking about doing an Optic and how that's going to work. Guys, I want to talk a little bit more after we've done the cut work. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other parts that are here. I want to talk about, we do offer coatings that match the slide if that's something you want to have done. These do ship with 2 different sets of screws. Okay, so when you buy one of these, they come with 2 different sets of screws. We do, I'll lightly say this, we do stock some of these, okay? So if you just don't have one, you don't want to ship it, but you want to get it back and you want to get it done, you just don't want to have the hassle, let us know first, so we'll see if we can add one of these to your order. We do usually stock the 407K GR. Sometimes we'll have the red. And for that understanding for you guys that are unsure about that, what that means is it's just the dot. It's not the circle in the dot. It's just the dot. There are other models that we may stock at some point, but right now, the making of this video, we just stock the affordable line, and this is just to get something on your gun that doesn't cost an arm and a leg to do it, and we have those in stock mostly. So we're going to talk about some screws. We are going to show you, once it's been mounted, what it looks like, and see what we come up with. So now we're going to jump into some cut work, and let's bring it back after it's been colored. Alright guys, now that we are back together, we got the parts back in the slide and the Optic has been mounted, let's just review the work a little bit, show it to you a little bit more, and then of course we're going to discuss a few things that we didn't cover in the beginning of the video. So this is exactly what it looks like. It's a nice clean look in the back. We don't have any remnants left over of the iron sight dovetail. We didn't cut up into the front where the loaded chamber indicator bar is. And of course, we're able to co-witness the rear built-in iron sight with the front factory sight. So it's a nice setup there. We will include some pictures that's going to show this off just a little bit better. On this project, we went back to tungsten. Of course, there's a whole range of colors you can pick from once the cut work has been done. So you don't have to go back to the color that you have. You could go with something else, or we could go back to just matching whatever it came in as if you'd like. Alright guys, so a couple of things that we did not discuss at the beginning of the video is the screws. Okay, so inside of the box, when these ship, I'm going to put this down here When these ship, they come with 2 packs of screws. Now, depending on what you're buying, because if you end up buying like a Swamp Fox Sentinel, there may be a pack of more screws. I know if you're getting something like the Springfield has the Wasp ends up having other screws in there as well. But typically, if you're going with the 407 507K or the Romeo Zero, you're going to come with 2 packs of screws. And they're going to look just like this. You're going to see 2 little pockets. If these are not in here when you bought your Optic, you need to go back and figure out where they are, because they're supposed to ship with 2 different screws. So this one is the smaller or the thinner one, and that is what we call the M3. And then this one is the fatter, thicker, and this is what we call the M4. Now you guys can see, and I will include a picture, but you guys can hopefully see there's a difference. This one is thinner than this one. We cut the slide for the M3 screws. Now let me explain that a little bit better. Why? One of the reasons that we cut it for the M3 screws instead of the M4 is that it gives us an opportunity, if there was ever an issue with the screws, you stripped one, you snapped the head off, somehow you got one lodged into the slide, you cross-threaded the slide, any of the following issues could render your slide basically useless, and now you've got a stuck screw inside of the slide. The opportunity that we have here is we can remove that screw or part of the screw, and then we could recut the slide for the M4. So it gives us an opportunity to future-proof you in the event that something was to happen. Of course, if one of our slides was done and sold to somebody else and you bought it secondhand and it was threaded for the M3, there's always the opportunity to change it to the M4 if there was a serious problem. So that's typically what we would do on most of the slides that we offer here, even though it's not just a TP9. So if you're going to see some of the other slides, that's what we would offer. The only time we would screw the slide or thread the slide for the M4 screw is if we were matching a factory thread. Something like a G43X, we would end up using the M4. The Hellcats, we would use the M4 because we're matching what comes from the factory with the optic holes, or the optic that's already mounted on there. So we're going to basically match that, so that way everybody isn't confused. But as far as it goes with you in the TP9, we're going to end up doing the M3 screws. They just seem to make a little bit more sense. I think it's just a little bit more logical overall. So let's talk about one other thing. The parts. So you're going to have a rear iron sight that's left over, right? So we pull this guy off. This is going to end up getting bagged, and we're either going to put it in your optic box or it's going to go in your shipping box. But either way, this goes back to you. We don't keep any customer parts. So you're going to want to just hold on to this in case you end up running across another one of these, or maybe you pick up one secondhand, the rear sight's been destroyed or damaged really bad. Just hold on to this. You never know when you're going to need it. So this is basically going to go back to you. We don't keep any of these. If there's something else that you were to send to us that we acquired, we would send it back. One of the other things that we had seen at the beginning of the video was there was a whole pack of extra parts, right? So at the other slide from the other customer had a mag well and there was a mag extension. Those are parts that can be matched to your slide. So we do offer that service as well. If you're going with a different color, you're not just keeping it black. You have the opportunity of sending in those other parts and we would color match them at the same time. There, of course, is a charge for that service. It's listed under additional services and then frames, because anything that's attached to your frame, mag wells, triggers, mag extensions, base plates, mag releases, a lot of those pieces are going to fall underneath the frame portion of it, because a lot of people are sending in just the frame with those extra pieces. So that's kind of where we have that listed. So that would be service, all the way at the bottom, additional services, and then of course you'll find the frame coating, and then you'll find the slide coating. It's located under the frames. Guys, hopefully this video has been somewhat educational for you guys. Once again, thank you for the both the individuals that kind of added to the video, one with sending in the extra stuff, and of course the other guy, which is this guy, that actually wanted to have that video done. Going back and reviewing it, the comments that were made on this a little bit more, it seems as though maybe this is a YouTuber, and it wasn't just we want to do a YouTube video. I think it was more like we would like to do a YouTube video, or maybe even interview me about it. So with that being said, there may be a chance that you're going to find another review of us on YouTube. So you might want to search. You may get a different perspective from the owner than you're getting from myself, because I'm obviously the guy performing the work. So that might be a great opportunity to see both sides of that story. Once again, guys, a lot of content on our Instagram and Facebook. We've got an excellent rating on Google. Please leave us a Google review if you end up having work done. If you like the work, it just encourages other people to have the work done. Leave your your comments in that and let people know that, you know, this was my turnaround time, this was my quality of work, this is what I had done. You know, every project's a little bit different, and customers want to hear from other customers because they're deciding whether they want to send something in or not. So we would encourage you to spend a little bit of time in doing that. I do apologize about the video being crazy long. I do believe it was fairly thorough, which is kind of what we were going after, was kind of that complete overall you know, conversation about this topic, and I think we kind of hit the nail on the head on that one. Once again, if you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to use the contacts tab. You can always send us an email direct, and we'll try to email you back. Hopefully you have a really good understanding of what goes into having this done, with receiving, disassembly, getting the cut work done, sandblasting, cleaning it up, you know, coloring it, getting it put back together, and all that's done in a 2 to 3 business day turnaround time. So, and then you're, you know, believe it or not, you're not the only one that has a slide here. So we do try to process these relatively quickly, but there are a lot of steps that go into the process of getting one of these done. So hopefully you guys can appreciate the high quality turnaround time in such a short span with the amount of work that is needed in order to turn out that project. Guys, if you need anything, feel free to let me know. And of course, follow along as we have other videos coming out shortly.